Hello, and welcome to Artificial Intelligence in the Public Sector, AI and the States, the second episode of our third season produced by GovExec TV in partnership with the National Academy of Public Administration and ACT-IAC, the American Council for Technology Industry Advisory Council. I'm your host, Chris Teal, Managing Editor for Route 50. AI innovation is transforming state governments, earning the number 2 spot on the National Association of State Chief Information Officers' Top 10 Policy and Technology Priorities list for 2025. With groundbreaking advancements like generative AI and large language models, states are racing to update their policies and design strategic roadmaps to harness AI's potential. But how are state leaders driving this transformation and shaping the future of government operations? Let's find out. Okay, let's get into our discussion. I've got 2 experts joining me. We're going to talk about AI and the states. Immediately to my left, I have Doug Robinson. He is the Executive Director of the National Association of State Chief Information Officers. And then next to Doug, I have Dr. Alan Shark, an Associate Professor at George Mason University's Shah School of Policy and Government and Co-Chair of the National Academy of Public Administration's Standing Panel on Technology Leadership. Before we start, I should note that both of these gentlemen are Fellows of the National Academy, which is a co-sponsor of this series on AI and the public sector. Doug, Dr. Shark, thank you so much for joining us today.
Pleasure.
Pleasure. Doug, I'd like to start with you. I talked in my introduction about NASCIO including AI on its top 10 policy and technology priorities for 2025, and it's ranked highly. It's number 2 this year. What kind of drove the selection and its kind of high ranking among your priorities?
I think the possibilities. So in 2022, 2023 in our top 10 list, it did not even appear on the top 10, and then rocketed to number 3 for last year when we did our ballot for our state CIOs, which we do every year. And then for 2025, already moved to number 2. So I think it's the opportunities, the possibilities, great interest by the states, and there's significant interest on this topic by state legislative bodies, which is unusual to see a technology type of solution be so high on their interest. So that's, I think, a number of things that are driving that, but certainly the opportunity to improve citizen services and to support operations and administration of government gives them great opportunities for improving and innovating.
Is that exciting, or is it a challenge to explain something technological to state legislators? You know, they have all their different backgrounds and interests, yes, and here you are, the tech guy. Is that challenging, or is that kind of fun?
It can be both. I look at it both ways. It can be challenging because you are on a constant education process. We've been doing that for a dozen years with cybersecurity, so we're used to that constant messaging. There's also continued significant turnover because of many states enacted term limits. So you have new legislators coming in, several thousand last year that were elected that had not served previously. So that is definitely a challenge, but it is exciting to be able to see the uptake. And I think as the legislative bodies get younger, they're more attuned to the possibilities of how technology can transform state government. So I see it as again a really exciting opportunity. We work closely with the National Conference of State Legislators and their organization, and I think that's an important thing to have that connection with a strategic alliance with that group.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Doug, I'm going to stay with you, and then Dr. Shark, I promise we're going to hear from you. Last November, NASCIO wrote a report. You called it "Generating Opportunity: The Risks and Rewards of Generative AI in State Government." Can you kind of talk us through some of the key insights from that report and kind of some of the biggest risks and rewards of generative AI for states?
Sure. This was a president's initiative on our past president, Jim Weaver from North Carolina. So he selected this because he wanted to see, based on all of our research and our surveys throughout the calendar year, kind of toward the end of his term, what are we seeing about generative AI? Because that's all we're talking about, very high on the hype parade and a lot of interest. And so we wanted to have kind of a reflection, look at the survey data, re-examine it, but also then we interviewed about 12 state CIOs. And kind of what we found was, as you mentioned, a high aspirations, a lot of excitement, tempered by the realization that they're going to have to work on governance, they're going to have to work on frameworks and policies that apply to the executive branch, and they have some, cautionary things around ethical, responsible use, inappropriate use by employees, concerns about data quality. So again, opportunities, which we really led with that piece, and then provided 6 recommendations. I won't go through all those, but essentially, it just was guidance to the state at a very broad level, coming from the voice of the state CIO. So experiment, explore opportunities, do some innovation. While you're doing that, making sure that you're looking at these challenges, addressing data quality, addressing the upskilling of the workforce, recognizing that there are there's unintended consequences, which one of the CIOs said that we definitely need to avoid to maintain the trust of citizens. So a fairly straightforward set of recommendations for the states, which actually apply to, I think, any public sector, any government organization could use those.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, now, Dr. Shark, I know you've researched this topic a lot as well. What are some of the things that you've found, and do you feel that there's a lot of, I hate to use the word synergy, but synergy between what NASCIO has learned and yourself?
Yeah, I've worked with NASCIO for 15 years or more. And we do an annual comparison of our survey and our data. And what's interesting is that each year our priorities align more closely than ever before. Cybersecurity probably will always be number one, but our members are basically, which I have to say are cities and counties, totally line up with artificial intelligence being number 2. You asked the question earlier about state legislatures. Well, we have similar issues, at the local level. And the question is, where are they in all of this? And the answer is, I think AI is one of the first technologies, which to me is not that technical from the eyes of everyone thinks they're an expert or they know everything because it's everywhere. It's inescapable not to see some article that talks about AI. So cutting through all of that is the challenge. But I think the local government level, it is totally complementary to what we see in the states. Sometimes being closer to the citizens, we're seeing more citizen engagement actually being deployed. So I think the applications that NASCIO talks about and Doug talks about totally align with what's going on at the local level. And we do work together. And so having this alignment makes things a lot easier.
Yep, absolutely. And I think Alan makes a good point, is that the local governments, we continue to advocate for a closer relationship with local governments and the state. That can be a challenge sometimes, but I think they are closer to the citizens, and they, in fact, may see more direct impact from these Gen AI solutions than citizens at the state level. It may be a little bit higher level, and maybe a little bit more abstract. They're going to see if Gen AI is used to route garbage vehicles or used to eliminate reduce ton of traffic congestion or help reduce perhaps critical intersections from collisions and things like that. We see all these use cases out there. I see that being much closer to the citizens than what some of the states are doing.
Yeah, great. Well, speaking of articles, Dr. Shark, you wrote a piece recently about AI fatigue, which is an interesting concept that maybe we all feel at this table sometimes. Is there a danger that the technology is overhyped? Is it being maybe talked about too much when it's already here? Talk me through some of your thinking on this.
I think the word fatigue is alarming to some people and disarming. It causes some confusion, consternation. Think of it as being overwhelmed. Your point is well taken. It is everywhere. Everything that we read, everything that we see. Is it being overhyped? No. From my research, I think this is the most significant advance in technology since the internet was made public. I know of nothing else. I used to think cloud computing might have fit that bill. There's no equal to this in terms of what it can do. And when you think of what governments do, no one collects data better than governments. And so AI is nothing without data and knowledge. And what it's really doing is finding clever ways to take this information and manifesting it in many ways, hopefully, that is useful to public managers. I think that's our challenge, is we're overwhelmed with things. What's real, what's not? Is my vacuum cleaner and washing machine really AI driven? The manufacturers will say yes. Are the things that are checking my grammar in every email I send, is that really AI? Doesn't matter. We're dealing with more automation in every communication item that we use today. And so, yeah, it is out there. And what we're hearing from our CIOs at the local level, and I'm going to say probably at the state level too, there is a sense of being overwhelmed by where do I start? How do I start? What is the low-hanging fruit? Where can I find the best bang for the buck? And how do I navigate this in a realistic way that does not cause more harm than good?
So you're saying that maybe a washing machine with AI could do my laundry for me is kind of what we're hoping for at this point. I think that would be quite nice.
One manufacturer says that they're looking at 420,000 data points. When you put something in your machine, it is dispensing with the exact amount of detergent and bleach. It is ordering refills when it senses you need it. It's endless.
As long as it doesn't tell me my socks have holes in that. I guess that's the main.
But then there will be a robot that will open the door and then darn it,
That's right.
put it back in.
Put it back in. Yeah, I want the folding component of that.
Yeah, the ironing part.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, so we've talked about how do we start, how do we navigate this sort of thing, and I know NASCIO has talked about needing a roadmap, a path forward to, make proper use of AI. I know you guys identified about a dozen or so considerations. I'm not going to ask you to list them all out here, Doug, but what would you say are the top priorities for states and possibly even for local governments as well as they navigate this technology and using it?
Yeah, good question. I think they're very similar. So as we, kind of the early iterations of the states almost a year and a half ago, we kind of had conversations, and what we did see was the need to provide at least a high-level kind of blueprint and say, these are 12 considerations you should include in your overarching framework. And so we've seen those addressed in executive orders and legislation and CIO directives. That's where we're seeing most of the action. And I'm pleased because we see traction at the state level with a lot of these. So we talked about, again, a dozen. I'll point out two or three. One is the governance, so the shared decision rights. So with a kind of a federated model in the states, the CIOs are taking the lead in this, but they also have to work closely and collaboratively with their agency leaders. And so we said you need to have a governance structure so you can have kind of shared decisions and work on creating a more detailed kind of roadmap. So that was critical. I mean, that's critical for every state. And having some kind of task force or advisory committee. So we followed up on that. And right now we're at about probably 75% of the states have some type of task force or advisory committee on AI. The other is around data quality and data integrity. As Alan just as mentioned, you've got to feed the beast. And so that requires high quality data. And we know that the states are struggling with that and about their data integrity and data quality. So that was one of the 12 is you need to begin to address that. And the other one I'll highlight because there's a significant gap is the skills related to the incumbent workforce, whether they're IT or just the general service state employee. There's a definite gap there and a lack of training around how to best apply these tools in their daily work process. So these are what the benefits they have, and there's some general fear about the fact that there may be some job displacement. The CIOs don't see that. They see the opportunity to really bring their employees up within their organization and other state agencies. So those are three that I'll highlight because we did follow up empirical surveys of our members to get more details about those 6 months down the road to kind of say where are you in terms of addressing these items. So that's kind of a highlight of our blueprint.
Absolutely. And Alan, for cities and counties, is it hard to have a sort of roadmap given the dramatic disparities between cities, between county governments and the resources they can allocate? How do you suggest that they navigate these kind of early days?
Carefully, very carefully,
Yeah.
incrementally. It is a challenge, and I don't see a difference between cities and counties as much as I do size. Between a township and a large city and a small county. Each one has a different learning curve. However, we're seeing some incredible innovation in some of the smaller townships. Maybe it's a smaller ship to steer, and if you see an iceberg, you can get by it real quick. But where you start, is as perplexing at the local level as the state. I almost envision like a board game where everybody's still at the monopoly start line, and they're kind of climbing over each other about policies and decision rights. That to me should not be that complicated. When you think about it, if you have good data governance, you don't need to have all these other safeguards. But because I think the state of data today is not what it should be, we're looking for an extra layer of protection. So people are afraid, and I think government, all levels, are risk adverse. That is the culture. But there are some very brave souls, and I think their stories will help instruct others on what's possible, perhaps what to avoid. But we are seeing movement finally in that area.
Great. Well, let's keep talking about some of those brave souls. We don't mind. I mean, AI it has the potential to improve citizen services in the way that governments deliver all their various efforts towards their citizens. Alan, I want to stay with you. I mean, what are some of the initiatives that are maybe underway or being considered that excite you the most when it comes to AI-driven service delivery?
Well, when it comes to citizen delivery, I think the idea of having chatbots is probably, I'm going to say, the low-hanging fruit, which doesn't mean it's simple. It just means it's a reasonable place to start, and there's over 100 localities that are already experimenting with this now. Some are more advanced than others. Some of them are well-known cities. What's interesting is the evolution. It has actually, in the last 5 years, grown from what I call a voice response system, meaning it's listening, and listening very well, and then deciding one of 5 responses to give for every question it determines. Now it's actually getting into more Gen AI, where it's going beyond what it is scripted. So it has moved from voice response to Gen AI. It has become more free-flowing. The voices that people are hearing are much more lifelike, and their ability to understand is much more realistic, except for the fact I've been reading about some AI agents have trouble with certain dialects, like a Southern dialect or a New York accent. But overall, one of the vendors I'm aware of can speak 75 languages. And so when you think of call centers and the ability to really relate to citizens, if we can get that Gen AI to kind of be a little bit more folksy and to relate at a level they understand, not just vocabulary translation, but nuance translation, I think it's going to go a long way. And so far, the surveys I'm reading is citizens actually feel that they're getting a fair shake talking to an agent, an AI agent, because they feel they're being treated the same way as everybody else. So that, to me, I think eclipses all other things. The rest is more internal. What makes individuals who are interfacing with citizens perhaps more knowledgeable and the like, but that's not what the citizen is seeing. The chatbot is. And the last thing I want to say is the chatbots have moved from a text-based environment and are now getting into that voice. So, and this gives people a choice. The only thing I always caution, make sure you have a disclaimer, because the last thing we want to do is fool people into believing that that friendly voice is a human being.
Exactly, yeah.
And Doug, from NASCIO's perspective, what are you seeing in terms of service delivery and that sort of side of things?
I think we've collected a number of existing applications. They're still early on in what I call kind of the full-blown Gen AI. States have been using what I would consider to be traditional artificial intelligence for years. We've done a number of studies and surveys on that, but when we get into the Gen AI, it's still early days for them, but we're seeing some real exciting things. Like Alan mentioned in terms of the local governments, I think a probably predominance of what I would call internal business applications. So document management, doing things around legislative summaries, business process automation in terms of supporting that with Gen AI capabilities. So it's really that on steroids. So we're seeing a lot of that. We've written a report with our friends at the procurement officials around streamlining procurement, and again, an internal business process. So we see that focus with a little bit, that I think is important because that's that little bit lower risk, right? And so they're willing to experiment with that. And now we're seeing just in the last few months, more conversations around those citizen-facing services. Alan mentioned translation. Well, that's a mandate in many states. In New York State, it's 13 or 17 languages for their website. So that used to be a very laborious kind of back-end retrospective thing. Now, a lot of that can be automated with Gen AI, and so they're using those tools to do that translation. They've also moved aggressively into using AI-supported chatbots and virtual agents. It's kind of interesting, is pre-pandemic, there were only about a half a dozen states that were doing that, and because they were reluctant to really have those tools have an interface to their citizens. Most states were reluctant to do. They didn't want to do that. Pandemic really drove them. We saw a dramatic increase in chatbots and virtual agent use, and then now we see them all be supported by Gen AI capabilities. So they're much more, again, natural language and much more closer to the regular call centers. So those are some of the things we'll see. Areas around things like identifying labor opportunities. We see states that are using Gen AI now to crunch a lot of data, giving them very streamlined analysis. The congestion areas, and that's one of California's projects, is how can we reduce congestion, doing Gen AI analytics. And I think the power here is just the massive amount of data, but also the speed. And so they can really accelerate their decision making. So I think we're going to see in 2025, we're going to see some, much more on the ground, realistic use cases come to fruition as they begin to experiment these. So it's kind of going to be an exciting year. So we'll learn some things.
I hope so. Yeah, absolutely. So obviously it's early days. We have states trying to figure out the governance for AI and how do we approach this, and issuing executive orders and task force reports and that sort of thing. Are there any emerging best practices on governance and leadership and oversight in the states on AI? Anything coming out that seems to really be working well?
I'd highlight a couple. One is, as you do any of these initiatives, is understanding your current environment, understanding your baseline. So we have a number of states that mandate, either through legislation like Connecticut or executive order like California and others, mandating a documentation or inventory of existing utilizations, because that's you need that exposure and accountability. You need to know where it's being used today, particularly with the Gen AI tools. So that's one we're seeing is the acceleration of that. Connecticut actually has their list or inventory, so to speak, of all of their AI tools in their data portal. So the public can see where is this being used. So that's going to be important. I think that's part of that. Another I think area of that is the transparency and accountability. So making sure you're transparent. Alan talked about the disclaimer. I think that's going to be part of the patterns of success, is not only externally for citizens, but also that the states require the disclosure, by their vendors and their business partners. And we're seeing a few states now, that's early, including those statements in their terms and conditions. So basically we've got a solicitation, we're going to buy X solution for the state. If you're using any Gen AI capabilities in that solution, you must disclose that, to the state. So I think that's going to be an important, and we will see certainly by the end of the year, close to 100% of the states have some type of task force. So they're going to be in a continual learning situation. And I think we're going to see more states like Massachusetts and others that build sandboxes and have these innovation capabilities to test and do proofs of concept before we roll these things out. So those are some of the things we're seeing from the states that I think are exciting for us anyway, as they're kind of leading the way in some of those areas.
Yeah. And Alan, how about for yourself? Are you seeing any best practices emerging in this governance area?
In the governance area, I think perhaps the most important thing, which I'm starting to see being addressed, is AI leadership. And it's really important. The former administration had this very lengthy executive order. Probably that will be rescinded, but it basically said that there will be an AI officer in every federal agency. And the question then is, to what extent does that spill over into our thinking at the state level, at the local level? I think Doug and I, we've had this discussion. I think we agree, stop me if I'm wrong, that somebody should be in charge. Because if you have everybody doing their own thing, that to me is one of the worst things that could happen given the power of this technology. We both believe it probably should be the CIO or that person's designee reporting to them. We have too many chiefs in my mind anyway, but the idea is that someone needs to be in charge. So when we talk about governance, you can have all the policies you want. What we don't want is everybody doing their own thing without any kind of coordination, understanding. If we didn't have that, we're going to have a new term called shadow AI, just like we have with shadow IT, where you have people doing their own thing because they're going to follow the path of least resistance.
Shadow AI sounds frightening as well, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It's the kind of post-apocalyptic world that we...
I think it's going on now. I think it's going on now. Yeah. So ubiquitously available, and so it's easy for. We've had states by policy prohibit their employees from accessing those tools because they're concerned about the use of state information and the personally identifiable information being obviously used. So they are concerned about that. I agree with Alan. I think we've already got shadow AI going on. It's just not at the level that could cause harm, but it certainly could in the future if it's not controlled.
It's a leadership vacuum right now.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, while we're on the subject of risk, another area that people are worried about with AI is cybersecurity. NASCIO found that the two priorities are very, very high on your agenda as ever. But there are always worries about AI and cybersecurity and whether we're going to be able to keep everything safe and that sort of thing. Doug, what steps are states taking to mitigate some of these security risks, and what else should they be doing if there's anything that they're missing?
Yeah, it's significant when you look at the intersection of those two. So we see right now around, based on our latest data, over 40% of the state's chief security officers report they're using Gen AI in their operations. So cyber ops, we look at that as being one of the highest value propositions for AI, along with fraud detection, prevention. We think there's some real areas of exploration, but we already know that, again, a high percentage of the states are already doing that. They're doing that because in many cases they're fighting against Gen AI generated threats coming from threat actors. So again, back to the data, 2024 data, we asked our group what was the predominant kind of leading causes of cybersecurity incidents. Number one was third-party threats. Number two was Gen AI related threats. So what they're doing is creating an opportunity to use the tools they have in place and the new capabilities against their adversaries, but that continues to increase, particularly nation states and foreign actors have almost unlimited resources to attack public sector organizations, and states are high on the list. So having a centralized cybersecurity operation has been one of those areas that the states have utilized. The other is really increasing their capabilities around their skill sets. And that's a huge challenge for the states is the talent crisis and cybersecurity. So those are some of the things that they have been addressing.
Mm-hmm. What about for cities and counties? Is it a similar story when it comes to cybersecurity and AI?
I think they become inseparable in terms of how we protect our perimeter, our enterprise. When you think about the strength of AI, regardless if it's Gen AI or just generic AI itself, the strength is in finding anomalies and seeking patterns in record-breaking speed, more so than any human could possibly hope to. So the idea of finding a needle in a haystack is actually more possible today. So we are also dependent on the vendor community in terms of what's available. We can talk about things, but unless there is a service or product out there, we're kind of having theoretical conversations. But there are vendors now that are coming forward that can look and monitor our systems using this high-level, sophisticated set of tools that are looking for these things that a human would never see 24/7, and even better, take mitigating kind of actions faster than any human, like shutting down a particular part of a system, alerting people in real time, and continue to alert people till they actually get someone to do something. So this is a major assist in our ability to secure everything that we need to protect.
Yep. Major force multiplier. Given the lack of resources that the states, even if they have a very aggressive investment posture on that, there's literally millions and tens of millions of attacks every month against state governments. And so they're going to become, as Alan said, I think, highly reliant in that intersection of Gen AI and cyber is going to become indistinguishable because they need it, because they're not enough human capabilities, human eyeballs. So they're monitoring all those and being very proactive. So I think those are built into every new tool in the cyberspace that the states are buying are now powered by AI. That's their moniker, right? So we expect to see that grow with all of those platforms.
We're gonna, because we're kind of coming towards the end of this, I'd like you both to get your crystal balls out and be a bit of a soothsayer for me for a couple of questions. When we think about the implementation of AI, what is successful implementation? What does success look like when we kind of see this technology and governments embracing it? Doug, I want to start that one with you.
Well, I think from the states, as we've talked about being somewhat risk averse, stopping bad things from happening would be probably high on their list. I think it's an opportunity to really transform the citizen experience. And so that's been certainly a criticism of state governments in particular, is their inability to have kind of a robust and seamless digital experience for citizens like they have in the marketplace, like they have as consumers. Can they do that? And I think Gen AI, particularly across the connections across the agencies, gives them a great opportunity to do that. So I think I look at that in the next year or so. It'll be interesting to see whether this momentum we have now continues without significant kind of disillusionment. We don't want to have that, but we really want to focus on strengthening the governance side of that and the policies and what they're doing so they don't have those missteps.
And Alan, what does success look like from your perspective for cities and counties?
Now, there are two categories. One Doug has addressed, which is the external environment. How do we communicate with our citizens? I think towards that end, one of the most interesting technologies that I'm starting to hear about is agentic AI.
Yep.
And agentic AI, they say, is going to eclipse anything that we know today about Gen AI, where a citizen may make an inquiry and suddenly the AI agent is now going to take over and say, have you thought of this? Do you want to apply for this? I think you're eligible for this. Do you want to do this? In other words, take care of multiple programs with one interaction. So that, to me, in my crystal ball, is very exciting to kind of gain better trust of citizens and make government come off as being far more responsive. I think they already have been, but I'm not sure everybody appreciates that. Internally, I think it's going to help managers, because these are a great set of tools, to become, I think, more adept at understanding patterns, understanding these anomalies and trends, and make better data decisions based on data. So I think AI is going to be a huge assist. I think the other part internally is going to help us be better communicators in terms of our presentations, what we write, what we think, and how we analyze. So it is a great tool. So to me, success is that we don't create any greater problems than we deal with today, that we're able to successfully address issues and be able to make the persuasive argument as to why we're doing certain things. We always do a good job of saying how we're doing things. We have to do a better job of saying why we're doing the things that we're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. Good point. Well, gentlemen, I'm afraid that is all the time we have. But Doug and Alan, thank you both so much for joining us today.
Been a pleasure.
And thank you for tuning in. I hope you're as excited as I am to continue exploring AI in the public sector. Join us next week, February 18th, same time, same place, for episode 3, Emerging Trends in AI, to get a sneak peek at the next chapter of AI innovation and its transformative implications for government. For GovExec TV at our studios in Washington, D.C., I'm Chris Teal. Have a great day.